We've got another cracking episode coming up. We're discussing the world's first national action plan for plant-based foods, which is taking place in Denmark. We've got two cracking experts from the Danish food industry to talk about this and how, unlike in other countries, it's not a divisive subject and it's managed to embrace all the stakeholders behind the shift to plant-based foods. So that's coming up. And please remember to subscribe to the Future Food Finance podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and also check into the Future Food Finance website, where each week you can get a daily update on how the publicly listed food tech companies are performing. Hello and welcome to the Future Food Finance podcast. My name is John Reynolds, the host, and this week we've got two fabulous guests discussing a hot topic in the future of food, which will certainly impact Denmark and is likely to have broader implications across Europe. So I'm talking about Denmark's introducing the world's first national action plan to promote plant-based foods. And we've got two brilliant guests. We're joined by Rune-Christoffer Dragsdhal, the Secretary General of the Vegetarian Society of Denmark, and Emil Andersen, who is the co-founder and CCO of plant-based company Perfect. So we're very appreciative of both of you for joining us. Let's just get brief intros. Can we just start with you, Rune, just who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for inviting John. So I'm the Secretary General of the Vegetarian Society of Denmark, which was actually founded in 1896. So it's a pretty old lady. And through the last kind of 10 years or so, we've developed and professionalized. And today we are an NGO, but with 17 employees working with the businesses, with the food service, with lobbying politicians, talking to a variety of players within the entire food ecosystem, you can say, in Denmark. And my main work especially is a policy work. So I talk with politicians in the parliament regularly.
Okay, and Emil?
Yes, hello guys, and thanks again, John, for the invitation. My name is Emil Andersen. I'm actually the CEO. Not to pay too much attention to that, just titles. Anywho, I am one of the three co-founders of Perfect, plant-based company based here in Copenhagen, Denmark. We specialize in clean label and whole food plant-based products within the alternatives category, where we have focused on creating new sensory experiences that are close to the plant realm than to the meat realm. And we've been doing that since 2018, and we are active in both retail and in food service, both in Denmark and also outside of the Danish borders.
Okay, and I called you Perfect Season, which I think you are called in English, but do you have a different name in Denmark then, or is it Perfect?
We have a different name in Denmark, which is Planteslagterne, which is directly translated into plant butchers. So it's a little bit difficult to pronounce for a non-Danish speaker. So let's stick to Perfect Season.
Okay, that's fine. So the reason for the podcast is last month Denmark became the first country in the world to publish a roadmap to make its food system more plant-based. So the 40-page plan outlines the Danish government's pledge to reduce greenhouse gases by boosting plant-based food production. And it's hoped that the plan, which is released by the Ministry of Food, Agriculture and Fisheries in Denmark, will inspire other countries to follow suit. So, Rune, I'll bring you in first. Can you tell the listeners how significant is this plan and what are your big takeaways from it?
Yeah, so it is really, as you were saying, it's the world's first. It's the first time in the world that a government has made a plan which is called plant-based action plan. And then that it even comes from a country like Denmark, which is very famous for bacon and butter, as you surely know, especially in the UK. And Denmark still has the largest livestock industry measured per capita in the world. So this is in no way meant to lead attention away from the fact that we still have a food system that is heavily dominated by animals. But then that such a country with that current reliance on animal products is actually now making a serious plan by the government. with a clear intention to move the food system in a much more plant-based direction. That is very significant, we think. And you can say there have been some developments leading up to this action plan. Actually, 2.5 years ago, Denmark updated its dietary guidelines to become basically almost in line, almost a copy-paste of the Eat Lancet Commission. I don't know if all your listeners are familiar with those, but there is this, the Lancet medical journal, and the a Norwegian NGO which publishes these guidelines that recommend what an average global diet could look like that would be both sustainable and healthy. So Denmark's dietary guidelines are almost exactly following those recommendations now, meaning actually now clearly emphasizing that we should eat plant-rich diets as a key recommendation in the Danish dietary guidelines. So that was already an important start. But then following that, 2 years ago, the Parliament and government made a deal to establish a fund for plant-based foods, which was with around approximately 100 million euros. And that, again, is very significant. There's no country in the world that has made such a fund, and which also has a broad scope, meaning that this fund can support anything from R&D, research and development of food products and ingredients, textures, flavors, export activities, training chefs, generally upgrading the education system, but it can also provide support to farmers who want to experiment with new varieties of seeds to get better raw materials for the products to be developed. So such a broad fund with that scope, and even though 100 million euros again is too little compared to what we need, there's still no other country who has done that. And then on top of all that, then came now the National Action Plan for Plant-Based Foods, which is again the first time that a government has made a document, 40 pages, trying to outline how a roadmap could be towards a plant-based transition. And this roadmap, this action plan, does include a long list of things. I can, if you want me to go into the detail in that, I can do that afterwards maybe. But there are several things mentioned in it that is kind of, again, showing, you can say, a holistic approach to the food system, how we need to look at everything from education system, public procurement, production and farmers, research and development. Is the whole thing, really.
Okay, that's a fantastic overview. So just for clarity, the Vegetarian Society of Denmark, I think you worked with the government on this action plan, and you've been, from my understanding, you've praised it, but you've also been critical about it. Can you talk a bit about some of the perhaps shortcomings of the action plan? And can you also just tell the listeners, you mentioned there, I think that you said the Denmark economy is still kind of wedded, or there's an onus on animal agriculture. I mean, how popular are plant-based foods in Denmark, would you say, compared to other European countries at the moment?
Yeah, so I would say some years back, I would still say our neighboring countries were far ahead. Today, still in terms of, you can say, actual consumption levels, it still seems to me that both Germany, obviously also the UK and Sweden are ahead of Denmark. But in terms of, you can say, a broad commitment across various parts of the sector, such as, for example, the public kitchens, that means the food in the hospitals, public sector workplaces, but also in the private sector, like that there is a very strong interest. There is a number of excellent startups, such as Emil's, which you'll hear more about in a moment. Again, there's a lot of stuff happening that is really moving in the right direction. So what we feel has happened within the last few years, and what we have really tried to do, coming with our history and name as a vegetarian society, we have really tried to work hard to show that we need to unite people. This should not be a divisive topic. We know it is a divisive topic in other countries, but what I think has happened here is that we've actually managed, together with other stakeholders, to somehow bring a lot of food system stakeholders together with the agreement that, yes, we need to transform the food system in a much more plant-based direction. And just that in itself, I think, is quite an important thing. And specifically in our work with policymakers, we've really been trying to gradually reach out to more and more political parties and more people within these political parties. And we have now this this situation where actually there are really politicians from a multitude of parties in the Danish parliament which respect us as an organization, the Vegetarian Society of Denmark. You wouldn't expect that. And who even call us for advice on these policies. And I think because we try to approach it in a pragmatic and friendly way, it is not as divisive. But again, you never know. Suddenly the public debate can erupt on social media. Things can happen, but we always try to keep things calm there and keep people being constructive and focused on changing things in a constructive way. But then with all this said, then we are really happy that this has happened, that we can get to a point where government and parliament decides to do this, and with a really broad support also in the parliament. Almost all parties are part of this deal, including most of the right wing as well. So, this is really bringing people together around it. But that said, there are no measurable targets in the action plan, and that is what we've criticized. If you want to track the progress, it would be nice to have an idea about that. This is where we are going. This is whether it's reduction in CO2 emissions from the food and the public sector kitchens, or it could be the number of hectares we want to grow with pulses, chickpeas, lentils, and beans, or whether it could be, the export, a new target for how much we would like to export in the future, or how much we'll invest in research and development. So these kind of commitments to measurable targets are not there, and that is what we're most critical on that part. We think that is a missed opportunity, and a lot of the stakeholders have said the same. But still, there is still a visionary language in it, and there are new initiatives as well. And it's also, apart from that, a compilation of some very recent initiatives. So we see it as also a nice roadmap that could be. We really hope governments around the world could look into this and see this is not. It doesn't have to be divisive. This is not so dangerous. Why don't we just start doing it?
Okay, that Rune, that's very well articulated, very well explained. So Emil, I'll bring you in. What's your from the action plan? Is there anything that strikes you as particularly noteworthy and important?
I can only mirror what Rune-Christoffer is saying on the whole value chain perspective in this. We cannot change one thing without changing the other. It only makes sense for a agriculture country like Denmark to not only have businesses like ours that are in the end of the value chain, processing and developing and marketing and selling these products to the end consumer and for professional, for kitchen professionals, but it also makes sense. It doesn't make sense if that doesn't have a positive influence on the on our environment locally here in Denmark as well. I would say, as I said, I mirror a lot of what Rune-Christoffer is saying. And I think we, as being in this industry on a daily basis, we are often blinded by everything that is not done. So I will start this also, as Rune-Christoffer did, from the positive angle, saying, okay, but relative to other countries, how big is this? And I think both the plant-based fund that was mentioned and this action plan is much bigger, and is both of them are first of its kind in the world. So from our perspective, and from a business perspective, and from a nationalistic perspective, I think it's great for us as a smaller business to be positioned in Denmark. There is though, I think it's great to look at the whole value chain, and to especially look at what can we do in the public purchasing. Mm-hmm. But what is still missing is generating a little bit more positivity from the end consumer's perspective. So it's often easier to have a lot of focus on R&D, have a lot of focus on education, have a lot of focus on the primary agriculture. But obviously for a business like us, where we can only survive. We can only make a positive change if someone is purchasing our products as well. And that's always where it's lacking a little bit, and that's perhaps also where it's lacking a little bit from our perspective.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you very much, Emil. And just for a business like yours, in this action plan, is there any, does it benefit you financially? Are there any kind of subsidies? Are there any inducements? And you mentioned you kind of the public there. What's been the public response to? I mean, are the public heavily engaged in this action plan, or are they kind of detached from it?
I think the public is very detached from it, to be honest. But I don't think there's a lot of ordinary Danes, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Rune-Christoffer, but that pays a lot of attention to this. But that's also okay, because this is about strengthening the supply chain. This is about moving the big pieces in all of this, and that's also where it's important. But for us, I think it's highly relevant that we have a lot of access to soft funds, so research and development funding. There is, I think, Denmark in general, from a startup perspective, is very, very good at this, both in very early stage funding for developing an idea, to later stage funding, to export loans, etc. There's a whole setup around creating successes around the startup world, both within plant-based and outside of plant-based. So that is great, and it's also been great to see over the 5 years that we've been going at this, that a lot of these innovation funds was maybe struggling a little bit to see how they should channel funds towards the food business, but now you can see that more and more the focus is actually becoming primarily not only on food, but primarily on impact ideas and impact businesses. So that transition has really happened over the last 5 years. So from our perspective, I think from research and development perspective, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of access to funding. There's a lot of collaboration ongoing between partners, both on the educational level, but also collaboration between what you would traditionally call competitors, collaboration between us and suppliers to create products for the future.
Okay, that's great. I'll bring Rune in. I mean, I mentioned the public response, and also before you said it's not you mentioned, I think you phrased it, a divisive topic. Well, what's been along with the public response? What's been the response of the traditional meat industry? Obviously, in Holland, you've had this kind of high-profile cases. Obviously, that's a different model, but to make their economy more environmentally friendly by cutting livestock numbers, and there's been a possible closure of some farms in order to cut emissions. There's obviously been some high-profile protests in Holland. But can you talk about the public response and also the response of the meat industry too?
Yeah, so again, so the action plan itself, I totally agree with what Emil has said. Like, this plan is also maybe made mostly for professionals, but of course followed by, you can say, environmental activists or green people or people who are really deeply into, strongly believing in transforming food systems and the environmental climate situation. These people, of course, are interested in following it, but the broad majority of the public is not engaged in it as such. I don't think that wasn't the plan either. This is more about setting up what can we more from the professional side do something. But of course the plan should still ideally you should still need to find ways to how to engage the broader public. So what we can see is for several years when we make an annual representative surveys with 1,000 representative people from the general public. We do that every year with the largest supermarket chain in Denmark, and we can generally see there's always a very clear majority who are open to eat less meat, but those who then actually do it is a much smaller number. And we, from the Vegetarian Society of Denmark, analyze this as a situation where there is actually and intention, but people find it difficult in their everyday lives. That also goes back to what Emil said. We really need private consumption to increase, but how to do that, to make that happen, and find that fine line where people, a majority of people, usually around 50, 60, I think recently it was like almost 65% saying they're open to eat less meat. But it's a matter of how you do it. There are certainly some of those people would react against it if you try to implement less meat in the wrong way. So it really matters how you do it, how much of it is by offering delicious alternatives in restaurants, in canteens, by getting more attractive prices in the supermarkets. And obviously, if you're a startup producing excellent, high-quality products, when you don't have the same, amounts, the same volume of products, the prices would usually be higher. So that's a really tricky thing. You need more people to get on board to lower the prices, but to get these people on board, you might need to lower the prices, and that's a tricky one for startups. I think we had an expo this weekend with more than 4,000 people, and there's so many extremely good, really, really good products there, but some of them are still not at a place where for the average consumer they would feel competitive price-wise, and that's the tricky thing. someone has to, we need to, of course, some startups can only survive for a certain amount of years at a certain scale, so you need to have to find a healthy, sustainable level and be happy with that, but at least to get it to a level where it's sustainable in the long term. And ideally, of course, we would want some of those to scale up a lot, so it becomes large quantities that can actually replace significant parts of the current production system. But it is really tricky. There are negotiations upcoming soon about a carbon tax on Danish agriculture, which may also translate into a carbon tax on the end consumer, because if they put a tax on the farmer, then they also want a tax in the supermarkets, so Denmark doesn't just start importing cheap meat from abroad. So that is going to be interesting where that ends. But again, we really think we can see it quite clearly. I can go to rural areas far away from Copenhagen, to agricultural schools with young farmers, going to town hall meetings in some more rural areas. And if you talk about it in the right, constructive, inspiring way, a majority of people are behind this and positive. But if you approach it in a too aggressive way or try to kind of force people to eat less meat, then there's a strong reaction against it.
And what about the response from the meat industry then? What's the...
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to answer that part. So the thing is here, and that's the thing, so the livestock industry here they don't want any plans on reducing animal production. At the same time, many of them can see that it's very difficult to reach climate targets, and also nitrogen emissions. Denmark has much this autumn dead seas. The oceans around us have become dead in large parts because of a lack of oxygen, and that comes largely due to emissions from agriculture. So there is a problem, but they try to avoid direct plans to phase out the livestock industry, but they've decided to embrace plans for how to grow the plant-based sector. And it seems like that, what the Netherlands, what they did in the Netherlands was actually just what the scientists are saying is necessary. But as you saw, that created also strong responses. So it seems like what one can hope for here, but that's not guaranteed, would be that if enough is invested in developing alternatives, then maybe more of the livestock industry would transition over towards plants, especially some of the younger farmers, the younger parts of the industry. But of course, it doesn't happen naturally, and you need large volumes of products to make it something that can actually replace some of the existing animal production. Mm-hmm. So I think the case, what we can learn from the Netherlands is that although they're doing what scientists are saying is necessary, you can create such a strong counter-reaction that it may not be the wisest way to do it. I think one should really look carefully about, again, how one lays out a vision. So again, shortly to say it again, the meat industry here, they are supportive. They are trying to develop alternatives themselves. We did make, believe it or not, the Vegetarian Society of Denmark made made a joint research and development strategy for plant-based foods together with the big agricultural lobby here some years ago. So they are open towards talking positively about the plants. But so the big question is whether we could become a showcase in Denmark where you can show that can also pave the way for the necessary reduction in livestock production. But that's still a big open question. And of course, again, taxing is important. There are some externalities, from the food systems that are not currently being paid. And that is making the products artificially cheap. And that's still clearly a barrier. If you really want to be competitive with much more sustainable and healthier and delicious new products, it's not fair that they are actually disadvantaged through the whole existing, economy of the food system, which favorizes animal products by making fodder cheap by subsidizing fodder production, for example.
Okay, that's very interesting. And what about, this is all focused on plant-based. There are obviously other alternative proteins. What about, we've written and talked about cell-based and fermentation and edible insects. Are they part of the plan too, or Emil, or?
Yeah, maybe I should make. Yeah, so actually, the Danish government is also soon coming with a strategy for green proteins, but that one would include anything from insects to fermentation to cultivated, but also to so-called greener animal fodder. So that's just a broad range of so-called green proteins. But specifically on cultivated meat, there are researchers in Denmark working on it. But that's still the level. There's some researchers here and there doing a bit. But I would say that fermentation and precision fermentation, there's some really big players in Denmark, such as Novozymes and Christian Hansen, and supported also by the Novo Nordisk Foundation, which is, the foundation owning Novo Nordisk, which has recently become Europe's most valuable company through selling medicine
thanks again, John,
for
the
weight loss
invitation.
and diabetes. So
My name
that
is
company's
Emil
foundation
Andersen.
is very
I'm
wealthy,
the CEO.
and they are investing in projects that are trying to develop fermentation solutions. So that might definitely also become something out from Denmark on the fermentation side in the future. But the action plan here itself is on plant-based.
Company based
Okay, that's great. So,
Denmark.
You've really explained it really well. So I'm just trying to get a sense of where Denmark is compared to other European economies. Because I think like the Swiss government and the German government, they've all kind of launched perhaps similar kind of nutrition strategies. But we're saying that Denmark have gone further than other European countries, but there's still some shortcomings, like Rune highlighted, with specifically with lack of targets. Is that fair to say, Emil? And do you think other European countries will mirror what Denmark is doing, or do you think they're already making their own kind of progress in their own way?
Which is directly translated into plant butchers. It's a little bit difficult to pronounce for non-Danish speakers. So let's stick to perfect season.
Okay, that's great. And the final word to Rune. I mean, that's the same question then. I mean, do you think other companies will replicate what Denmark has done, or I mean, are they kind of doing similar initiatives, and perhaps the Denmark action plan has been over egged and over hyped up?
No, so I think it seems like I haven't seen any. I haven't still seen any country getting even close to make this a dedicated action plan for plant-based foods. But so we do hope that this could convince more countries to do it. At the EU level, there is for example, again, a green or alternative protein strategy, but that includes a lot about fodder for animals. I think that's showing where the majority of countries in the EU are standing, that what you can get is this as a sub part of a larger strategy that mostly focuses still on animal fodder. So I do still think this is a pretty new territory, but what the Danish government has expressed in its action plan is that it will actually now to work actively for this at the EU level. And in 2 years, Denmark will have the presidency of the Council of the EU for half a year. And I think we're a lot of stakeholders here in Denmark who would love Denmark to put this on the agenda at that time. And that might also be the right time, to mature it a bit in more countries. Because again, it can be divisive, but if we can show in Denmark that it need not be divisive, that could really be I think, the way forward. But of course, more broadly on, again, of course, obviously, there are many parts of the world where people eat much less animal products than Denmark, and we learn a lot. We pick ingredient, inspiration by flavors and dishes from all over the world. Danish companies are doing that too, and so are the public kitchens. So I think what we have to say here, it's not that Denmark is an angel or a saint. There are many countries where we can learn a lot from these countries, but being a country with a lot of animals and with a high level of meat consumption, and how to transition somehow away from that, then I do think Denmark is giving a really beautiful example here, and we really hope that can inspire other countries.
Rune and Emil, that's really very eloquent, and thanks for painting such a kind of a vivid picture of what's happening in Denmark about the action plan and its potential ramifications for across Europe. So that's the Future Food Finance podcast, and thanks very much for listening.